I want to wish you a warm welcome to today's Live-In Dialogue. Today's topic will be our future life in a smart home in full control or to be controlled. And we wanted to let you know that this dialogue is being recorded, and if you want to see it back, you can find it on YouTube or on the Living platform. And in order to get to know you, our audience, we're very happy to hear, and you can write us in the chat where you're from, maybe which city, which nationality, so we know who we're talking to. So please write in the chat and let us know. I see people from Italy. From Vienna. More Vienna. Portugal, Rome. Innsbruck, Denmark. The USA. Portugal. The Netherlands. Barcelona, Sweden. Denmark. Madrid. It's really nice to see that we have such a global audience today. This is really nice. Canada, okay. More from Denmark. Okay, and if you now look outside your window, what is the weather like? Could you let us know? Is it rainy? Is it sunny? What is everyone's weather condition?
Sunny.
Sunny? That's probably Italy.
No, it's Denmark.
Denmark? Oh, that's lucky.
No, that's climate change.
No, we've had the sun before.
Okay, people are melting. Okay, so good luck. Okay, so we see very broad weather conditions. Well, the sea is blue, that's something, that's positive. Okay, really nice. So it was good to get to know you slightly better. So again, thank you for joining us today. And we hope we'll get a very lively interactive session with you, and that we can learn much more about how our smart home is working, if we are in control, what the big techs are, what the benefits are, but maybe also what the downfalls are. So hopefully we will all get a bit wiser after today's session. So looking at our speakers, Svetlana Ivanova wants to welcome you as well. She's a researcher at Isinoma. And Carlos Cessa, he's also a researcher and the CEO at Isinova. You will see him here. They will tell you a bit about Live-In and about the dialogues. And myself, I'm a project manager at Smart Homes, the Netherlands, and I will moderate the session today for you. So we have some short rules for today. Please use the chat function for questions at any time. We will see them pop up. And your questions will be summarized by the moderator. And it will be especially in the end of our session when we're going to talk with each other. Please try to mute yourself unless you speak. We've all been working at home for quite some time now, so everyone knows the reason, I think, for this now. And if you want, please switch on your camera when the moderator addresses you, so we can really talk to each other and see each other's faces. And if you don't want to be heard or seen, please consider following us on YouTube. Then you can also just do it anonymously. So for today's agenda, as you know, we're now starting with the introduction and the background. Secondly, my colleague Ad van Berlo will tell us everything about smart homes. He's also the CEO of Smart Homes, so he knows everything about it and the trends that are now happening. And then Afrodite Konidari will tell us about data-driven care challenges and opportunities as CEO and co-founder of Tendertech. This is a startup that knows everything about it. And then our last speaker, also from the Netherlands, is Tijn Schep. He has written a book about Design My Privacy, and he is also founder of the company Kendall, who does everything about data protection. So he's an expert on that area. Then we'll give you a window for questions and answers. And in the end, we will also have in-depth conversations with each other to really deepen in the subject and understand it a bit better. So now I would gladly give the floor to Carlos Sessa, who will tell us a bit about responsible innovation.
Good morning. I will say good lunch to all of you. We are at the beginning of the afternoon. So, responsible innovation, living innovation is a project funded by the European Commission. Actually, it's the first that was funded focusing on the industry, responsible innovation in the industry, and especially with partners from industry partners from ICT, smart home, and healthcare sector. But we address specifically this sector, but in general, more in general, the approach to responsible innovation. What does it mean in our project, responsible innovation? In the next slides, you will see a map of the concept that that is based on some key concepts that we asked all the participants in the events that we organize on single specific topics to take this kind of attitude. We want to take this attitude. Responsibility means a responsibility for impacts that are broader than the direct profit of some direct benefits, for example, for the company, towards a larger constituency of stakeholders within a more system perspective. Innovation, to innovate with purpose, for a purpose, of course, but with the participation of people and at a higher impact level. So to see what are not only the direct benefits on the market, but the social, environmental, wider impacts of the innovation. We see a responsible innovation also as a business case, something that is useful for the business, because that is the fundamental question for motivating companies to take this attitude. Basically, taking an attitude of responsible innovation may reduce risks and cost of any venture. Basically, you can have kind of co-creation processes that make your ideas in development and innovation better fitting with the context. And also a wider, in the system perspective, consideration of the ongoing game changers or radical innovation that are ahead of us. Social benefit is, of course, the main characteristic of benefits according to this approach, for avoiding what can be harmful impacts, unintended consequences of the innovation, and giving the right priority to what is the desirable scenario that is the innovation want to achieve, and how to be also more resilient to transition that we are all living to a more sustainable economy and needs that we have also in our business. Finally, all these responsible innovation matter include concept and tools that we develop, technology assessment, the assessment of the impact of technology, but also the assessment of social innovation and open innovation connected to the process, and broadly the context of the innovation ecosystem. This is the picture of the concept that are behind our work, but the work was very practically oriented to some case studies of smart living, and the smart home living case study that we address today is what the speakers we will discuss, will present to you in their presentation. Thank you, Marilyn, for giving me the floor. For having given me the floor.
Thank you, Carlo, for this very clear overview. So, Svetlana, I don't know if you want to tell us something about. I think this is another one.
Yes.
Yes.
No, this was correct. The previous slide is perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you very much. Just to give you an example of work we have run in these years on Live in Innovation, you can find on our platform more than 100 video interviews with high-level experts on the topic of responsible innovation and everything what comes with it. We had 20 webinars and online dialogues, and you can see the recordings using the search on our platform. Responsible innovation blueprints and showcases, compendium of community interactions, co-creation toolkits, and a lot of policy briefs, some publications and presentations. And just to give you an example of interesting things and topics you can find, next slide, please, Marilyn. This year, we have run this series of dialogues, getting to discover the world of technology and its intersections with leadership in terms of in conditions of remote working and later hybrid working. So we took these topics of a very large one in the beginning of technologies and leadership challenges and discuss how to lead virtual teams, discuss emerging technologies in this sector and the policy role in this. Then we had two dialogues, very technological ones on artificial intelligence and on holograms and virtual reality, how these technologies are used and what is the responsible way of using these technologies. Next slide, please, Marilyn. And we finish with these larger topics on new career skills and remote working post-COVID. And we even discuss mental health and work-life balance. So if any of these topics are interesting for you, you can go to the platform Live in Innovation and find the recordings there and some summaries and a lot of more interesting materials there. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thanks, Svetlana. Very clear. So we also want to ask you a few things about the future life in a smart home. And again, you can briefly share your experience in the chat box. And the question that we want to address, what are the most important issues relating to having a smart home? If you look at your own home or maybe the work environment, what would be the biggest issues? And you just can put whatever suits you in the chat. And then we can see what your opinion is about this subject. I see convenience, data privacy, high cost of ownership, again, privacy, not needing a technician for everything, yes, accessibility, data ownership, customer control, interoperability, ensuring that everything is connected to each other. Okay, this is already very interesting. Let's see if our speakers say the same things. Scalability, indeed. Clarity and transparency about assistance, yes. Technical knowledge about configuration of use cases, yeah. Energy saving, yes. The environment, sustainability. Okay. That's interesting. So thanks. We will see in half an hour of our speakers think the same things as you do. But there would also, of course, be benefits. So the same question, but then from the other side, what would be the benefits of owning a smart home? So also please briefly share your views in the chat like we just did. So what will be the benefits of owning a smart home? Comfort, yes, sure, feeling secure. Convenience, energy, you can adapt to your needs, yes. Aging, sure, important subject. Comfort, health, sustainability, adaptability, prestige, insight and health, convenience, making others jealous, of course, very important, and playing with technology. Tech savviness, yes. Energy saving, comfort, better control. Coffee ready, yeah, very important. Okay, I see very broad benefits. It's really nice to see how everyone thinks about these things and want to use it by themselves. Increasing value, yes. Tea, just as important as coffee sometimes, yes. Safety, lower insurance costs, yes. Okay. Sleep, definitely can help with your sleep. Okay, this was very interesting to see. Ambience, yes, the enjoyment when you use it, of course. Safety, yeah, that's also a new one. So you see sustainability, comfort, making people jealous, easiness, a lot of different subjects. Okay, well, thank you very much for this. So today we've got 3 keynote speakers who are very, very well advanced in these subjects. One of those is my colleague Ad van Berlo. He's CIO and research manager of the company Smart Homes, so he knows everything about smart homes. Then we have Afrodite Konidari. She is CEO and co-founder of this very big startup now, Tendertech. She knows everything about this. And then we have Tijmen Schep. He's a writer of a book, and he's the CEO of the company Kendall. But I will explain everything much better than I do about themselves. So therefore, I would gladly give the floor to Ad van Berlo, and he will talk about the trends in smart homes, what is a smart home, practical examples, what to expect in the next decade, and he will give a very, very good summary of these things. So Ad, if you want, you can now take over the screen.
Well, thanks. Oops, this is, yeah, wait a second, this is my first slide. Well, as Marjolein introduced me, yes, I'm working quite some time in the smart home area. And what I would like to do today is, well, after having seen that you all know a lot already about the smart home, I still want to give a very brief overview of what's going on here with some practical examples and what we can expect at the end of my presentation, what we can expect more or less in the next decade. And this is then more or less, let's say, the one side of introducing smart homes in the next 10 years, and the other two speakers will talk more about the pros and cons of the new developments. So I will give you more a presentation on what's really available now. And I don't think many of you know that, because you were not born simply at that time. I was, and I was looking at that time on TV and saw the Jetsons. And that's 60 years ago almost. And 60 years ago, they had this cartoon, which was very interesting because they projected live 100 years later, so in 2062. And it's very interesting that at that time they already saw that there would be a service robot. And the ones of Boston Dynamics, most of you know them, they are almost like that at this time. So we still have 40 years to go. But it's interesting that at that time, the concept already was there. And also a flat screen was mentioned. And at that time, there were only the big bulky TV screen, so to say. There was already a robot cleaner, and we had already in that cartoon video conferencing. But remember that only roughly 40, 50 years later, video conferencing came really into practice. So that was a very interesting movie. So what is actually a smart home? Well, we have had many formal definitions in the past, but we say it's a house, in brief words, in which many things happen automatically. And you have normally many sensors and actuators and central programming for that. In the beginning, some 20 years ago, when we saw a first breakthrough in our country, in the Netherlands, all houses had wired connections. And now you see wireless and you see a lot of connected smart appliances for that. But that was not the case 20 years ago. Now, just today, actually, we saw in the Netherlands again, and it was on the news, that the survey was made a couple of weeks ago, where it said that half of the Dutch households have smart things, smart appliances in their home. In the past, last year, they do that every year. They said half, or 40% it was last year, they said 40% of the houses are smart. Now they said, no, 50% of the houses have at least one smart object. Now that's, I think, could be true, although it's still very, very much. I can't hardly believe it's true, but okay. But now they say a smart object, and if you look at how many smart lighting things are being sold in all kinds of retail markets, it could be true indeed. And we have, of course, already a smart thermostat, and we have other smart things. And please realize that your washing machine is smart for a long time already, or even your thermostat started to be smart a little bit 30, 40 years ago. But what I oppose or do not call a smart house if you have simple things like this isolated. So I would say you can only talk about a smart house when you have several things together, and that's the second bullet here in this slide. Now, what you see, of course, is that in the past we built reactive smart homes, and we are now tending towards proactive in the near future. We will see also a strongly increasing number of chips, and in that way, the car. We always look at the car as an example of how smart things can be, but we are coming to self-driving cars. Well, in the near future, maybe similar amounts of chips will be in the house. And the cost, that's another interesting thing. What you see with all innovations, like about 20 years ago, with the same sort of appliances that we built at that time, for 20,000 euros, you can now do that for something like 1,000 euros. Well, most of the applications and that it was mentioned, of course, comfort and luxury also in the chat a couple of minutes ago, but most of the business cases for a smart home are still in independent living for all the people, and more coming now again back in the energy saving and the energy monitoring. Now, I give very few practical examples, but more for you to remember what's going on, because you all know them, and it's not that there's nothing new here, but it sets more or less the scene for the discussion later on. And it has nothing to do with aging or whatever. It's more in general what you can buy now as a consumer in the market. And you see many cheap products, for instance, in the lighting area. I talked about that, varying from 30 euros for a kit with 3 bulbs and a controller and things like that, what you see in the pictures. For the very cheap devices, up till 150 if you have more lamps. And for instance, the Philips, and it's now Signify, but the older Philips Hue, and everybody knows that name probably, is starting at 90 euros and it can be up to 300 euros. But that's the price range, which is very interesting. And there's a lot of competition. I know now at least 15 retail companies, even the pharmacists or whatever companies, Lidl, you know, and the big supermarket, they sell these devices. But of course, there are many problems with it. There are a lot of bad quality, and not all are good except the more expensive ones. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them, fortunately, work with Zigbee, which is more or less one of the standards. And all of them, except one or a few, use Wi-Fi. And you have, of course, the control via your voice, via Google or Apple. That can be go together with that, not necessarily, I should say. But if you control via Wi-Fi, of course, then you need reliable Wi-Fi, and that's not always the case in every room of the house. And what you see, there is no dimming possible, except I think that these days IKEA is coming, no, Philips is coming. Philips has announced, or I should say Signify has announced now a dimming module very soon. Now, another thing, access control, and you see, well, that's also well known. You know, the companies like Ring and also Google and so on, they are selling, but they are also getting cheaper. And the nice features are that the resident can see who is at the front door also remotely. You don't need to be at home. You can, after pressing the button by the visitor, the resident can talk via video conferencing. You can even have software on it that it distinguishes between innocent and suspicious movements of persons around that front door. And again, several companies sell these devices for systems for more or less like 250 euros. Then, yeah, the kitchen. There's a lot coming these days in the kitchen from the white good companies, the big white good companies, and the Japanese, but also the European ones. Here you see examples, just a few examples I took from Bosch. The Bosch is one of the bigger German companies, as you know, in white goods. Here I only took the smart fridge and the smart dishwasher, but they also have, of course, now they're selling ovens, the cooking, the furnace, everything, the washing machine, everything has Wi-Fi on board. You can monitor several things. For instance, in the fridge, you can have also advice on expiration times of the food that you have in it. You can, when you're in the supermarket, you can have a look into your fridge, what's in there. Well, the questions, of course, all, and that was also what I saw this morning from the review of the market view. All the people that have no smart appliances, which are still half of the Dutch households, they say there is no use for it. There's simply no use for it. And that's, of course, always what you ask yourself if you buy such a more expensive fridge. Is it useful or not? And the same with the dishwasher. Is it useful or not? Because you still need to put in all the dishes, and you can have a beep when it's ready, but okay. The dishwasher here is a little bit smart because it notifies exactly how dirty the wash is, the plates are, and it has specific programs. But okay, that's interesting, that's comfortable. But the question will remain, of course, is it all necessary? Yeah, there's another thing, vacuum cleaning, that's also connected to a smart home, although not necessarily. Of course, you can have a totally dumb house, so to say, but with a central vacuum cleaning system. The big advantage is no fine dust particles, of course, but still only in new built houses, it costs you around 1,800 euros. Of course, more known are the robot systems with sensors and object recognition. The latest one from Samsung I put there, and that's very interesting, a strong one, and that costs still a lot of money, 1,500 euros, but it works very nice. Yeah, then for the window, that's one of the old applications where we started ourselves also when we were deploying together with many companies the first smart homes in the Netherlands in the early 2000s. The curtains, automatic curtains and so on, but now you see a lot of new things coming on the market with electrical blinds, curtains, vertical, horizontal, the type of shades. And you can all remotely control them via your smartphone, also even a connection with a weather station that you don't need to be at home when the sun shines too hot and so on. So that here is particularly a lot of luxury coming on the market. Smart thermostat, yeah, a lot can be said here. That's particularly, of course, interesting for energy saving. But what you see here is, and that's interesting, I have it myself too, when you're not at home, you can see how warm it is, what the temperature is in the house. You can have that even in the different rooms, and you can also, when you have that extension with the extra switches, on your radiator, on your heating part in the different rooms, you can even switch there and manipulate the temperature remotely. So this is indeed a very important thing, and I also strongly believe that here we will see a lot of coming up of devices. Yeah, the robot, the garden, yeah, there's a lot, of course, if you have a garden, robot lawnmowers for more comfort, but you see more and more coming up are the smart draining systems, particularly now we are getting more, we try to save a little bit more water also, even in the Netherlands, but you see here that different plants can even have different amounts of water. And these things are also coming up, smart lighting, security systems, etc. Electronic door lock. Well, yeah, here I took only one scenario or two scenarios for that. That's actually, then we talk about real smart homes when things come together, when there is, after a certain detection of a happening, of an event, that you have then different actions taken automatically. And one is, for instance, if you come at your front door, the front door goes open automatically, and the Philips Hue in this example switches on automatically, and you come home very smoothly. That's comfort again. The other thing is more necessary for independent living after fall detection, that the door is also remotely opened when the person is laying on the floor. There is automatic lighting already, so that when it happens at night, that a nurse can come in, and so on. All these kind of things can be programmed and happen automatically, so that you can really talk about a smart home scenario. Well, for independent living, I don't have a lot of pictures here, but just for you to remind, there is a lot that we started to test out in practice many years ago. Automatic lighting for falls prevention is still one of the most simple things to do, and many people still do, particularly for going into the bathroom when you're older and don't fall over your other items that you don't see. Falls detection itself is one thing. Electronic door lock, I talked about that already. Automatic switch off of equipment at night if you forget to switch off whatever things. Medication reminding is an important one. Offering day structure is interesting when you are getting more forgetfulness. Vital signs monitoring, yeah, is that smart home? Not really, but okay, that's also more and more built in these days, even in smart mirrors and things like that. And yeah, specific technologies for people who are hard of hearing or even deaf and so on is also coming up, and it's very interesting if you want to stay independent. Now, there are a few trends in the next decades, and not only the first 10 years, but even in 20, 30 years, if you can even talk about that. And I just took here 3 horizons for innovation for health and aging, not necessarily related to the smart home, but as the smart home is mainly so far used for independent living of older people, at least where we were involved in the Netherlands, I thought it's interesting to look at what's on the horizon. You see sustaining innovation that you see coming up, wearable devices at home. So not necessarily you need to be at home, but wearables on your arm, on your wherever on your body. Do-it-yourself diagnostics are coming more to the home, and of course, digital healthcare delivery in the home, so the hospital at home. These are things that are coming up within 5 to 10 years very strongly, or even are going on. Then you see things that are not so much related to disruptive innovation, but gene therapy and editing and stem cell treatments are absolutely coming up within the next decade, including nanorobots. And what you see more in a distance things, but you see all the time small experiments at universities that give an indication that things are coming up. Brain-computer integration. We know about the company of Elon Musk who is working on that. You see also things as avatars and Internet of Bodies and so on coming up in the longer term future. And that has, of course, some influence on the evolution of the human being, I would say. And you probably know these 2 pictures also from other presentations or wherever from. The one left clearly depicts that we are getting into a lifestyle which is very bad for us. We don't move enough. We turn into a lot of diabetes patients and so on. And the right one is more saying, yeah, our lifestyle is probably not that good either when we only work on things like computers and so on. So is it time for a change in lifestyle and even time for different houses? And then I come to my last slide for this introduction. What houses are we going to? What houses can we foresee in the next decade or 20 years from now? And of course, first things to do is in all countries worldwide is going towards climate neutral and energy producing houses. And that will certainly happen, particularly our country is very, our government is very strong in that. The CO2 reduction, but also, bringing into producing houses even. And the second thing we see is that, or at least that's a tendency for maybe that we are looking for is we are so opening our house via the smart environments, but also via internet and so on, via the wireless connections with 5G and whatever's coming up, that we might long in the near future towards houses in which we can live, work, learn, relax, and care securely and more in a cocooning way, I would say. There is certainly a trend that also helps us there, I would say. And we will go, and that's more or less the technology that is bringing us to that. We will go to empathic houses. And what does that mean? Yeah, houses where we know where the house knows much better about things, everything about you, and they may suggest better things, better habits, not habits, but better behavior, I would say, and take. And suggest you to take some precautions or actions before it's too late. So these kind of things will certainly come up, and I'm sure that Aphrodite will also go into that. But that's a clear tendency in the next 5 to 10 years. So then my statement here for the discussion is, so we will go in the next 10 years toward houses with myriads of invisible sensors, like in the, well, already in the different equipment we have, but also like in the self-driving car, which may support your life to a big extent fully automatically. And that's, yeah, that's something to discuss. Do we accept that or not? But that's at least what I believe will happen anyway. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion later on if you all see that same thing happening or if you accept that as well. So that's it, Marjolein, for the time being.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Alt, for this very, very clear overview. I already see that it raised quite some questions and comments, which is very good. That means that we're going to have a very good dialogue. So we will address all these questions after the presentation of the speaker. So don't worry, we will still talk about it. So when closing the screen, I would gladly give the floor to Aphrodite to talk about her experiences when talking about smart homes and technology.
So I'm a co-founder of TenderTech. So TenderTech is an award-winning AI startup, and we are bringing remote people-centered care to the world. For today's presentation, I'm going to cover the opportunities and challenges that the application of machine learning is bringing forward for smart home residents, specifically for those residents who wish to receive care at home. So health and social care have undergone great transformations during the previous century. Our societies have been able to transition from systems where care was accessible to the few to systems where care is now accessible to all, especially here in Europe. Today, people are living longer, but often with multiple chronic conditions, and therefore new challenges are awaiting for us. Helping patients and seniors to live long, fulfilling lives without breaking the bank is a major challenge that healthcare systems are faced with. To achieve this across Europe, we need to find new ways to turn our one-size-fits-all approach in care, which is often siloed and underfunded, into systems where individual needs are captured and understood holistically and effortlessly on a mass scale in order to deliver individualized long-term care at home. So thanks to technological advancements in the areas of Internet of Things and machine learning, today we have powerful tools that can help us realize this transition. Internet of Things enables us to capture remotely and transmit continuous data streams from devices in any place and at any time. And machine learning is a powerful tool that can deliver insights hidden in those data streams. Together, these technologies can improve the decision-making process across different sectors and different industries. So how are these technologies changing specifically smart homes and care at home? First of all, IoT offers systems for supervising and monitoring patients via sensor networks made up from both software and hardware. Hardware includes a growing list of devices that Ad has presented thoroughly just early on. And the software process entails the recording, storage, and evaluation of sensor data using machine learning algorithms to trace anomalies and predict outcomes, among other features. We should know here that there are two important aspects of machine learning that are often misunderstood. First is that machine learning is a still evolving field. The hard truth is that many machine learning projects fail before they even see the light of day. And there have been studies showing that only 53% of projects make it from prototype to production, to the real world that is. And that's usually in organizations with AI experience. So the development of machine learning applications is less about off-the-shelf solutions and more about tailored and experimental research, which carries an inherent risk of failure. The second part is that there are two critical phases of building an efficient machine learning applications, and you can see it here in the slide. We have training and we have inference, or what we call also testing. The training phase is highly research intensive. It involves training a system based on label inputs, which are then stored and used for future predictions. I like to describe this more as teaching a child how to learn more about the world. And by giving it enough examples, it can learn to understand as much as possible from what it is given in terms of data. In the inferencing and testing phase, the system is fed new input for which it must predict the correct output. Simply put, a successful machine learning model can refer to its previous experiences and understanding to predict outputs based on new data that is fed. Therefore, the success of such an application depends heavily on the way we train it and on the data we use to train it. So let's have a look at how these technologies transform the home setting. As Ad earlier explained, homes are gradually equipped with connected devices. What began with lights and televisions is now progressing into all domestic appliances. The initial motivation and marketed offering has been the optimization of energy use around the home and the remote control of devices. As a result, these devices are equipped with usage data logging features and have led us to have accumulated bodies of data generated and ready to be explored. A quick recap, smart devices and wearables that have been widely adopted to date generate data around power consumption of devices, detection of events on devices like switching them on and off. We have environmental sensors that log in streams of information around temperature, light, or user presence. We now have more wearables continuously feeding us with signals from vitals. We have data on user location and on user activity levels, whether someone is sitting, standing, or they're being active, how many steps they took. These data records can be used to train machine learning models to make the home more helpful, more responsive, and hopefully more predictive for the user needs and routines. Let us have a look at some of the existing machine learning applications in smart homes. So what we already have is that we are seeing products that record user actions and preferences with regards to heating, cooling, or lighting. These data sets can be used to form patterns that could act as the basis of suggestions to users. For example, turning off unused lights when the user is away or asleep, turning on lights when the user wakes up in the night to avoid falls, turning on heating when the user is expected to use a room or take a shower. All this can enhance the comfort, safety, well-being of the user while supporting energy saving. We have to note here that one aspect that is still being developed is the feedback loop. So successful systems that do behavior monitoring rely heavily and should rely heavily on feedback from users, because unless we get feedback on the suggestions they make, they're not able to actually rate the kind of suggestions they give to users and continue with a certain type of suggestion or drop it altogether. Another application we already have is patient monitoring. We saw that especially during COVID-19 and during the lockdown, where we had a wider deployment of remote patient monitoring devices. IoT devices such as remote thermometers, heart rate monitors, weight and blood pressure monitors, they're all part of what we already have today. And what we can use them currently is to flag out outliers in the measurements and alert medical professionals of health deterioration. But moving forward, what a lot of startups in our field are working on is to use machine learning to analyze this data and identify risk factors associated with a given disease, as well as the signs and symptoms, the early signs and symptoms, with an aim to improve diagnosis, efficiency, and accuracy, and being able to help medical professionals determine the kind of intervention that should be adopted. So what we currently have is a lot of mainstream IoT devices that I would say are low cost, which is great, but also they're quite lightweight technologically. This has enabled their wider adoption, but the drawback is that they have a low resolution of data, which puts limits into what machine applications can learn and create. Remember, machine learning algorithms and applications are as good as the data are. So if the data are of low resolutions, we're missing there a window of opportunity. As the time passes, more deep tech solutions are coming into play that can offer access to high resolution data. Let's have a look at the most prominent applications currently in development. With regards to safety, with integrating machine learning into smart homes, improved safety and security is very possible. Access control and monitoring technologies using biometric measures will enable the creation of safer spaces. Here at TenderTech, we're one of the startups working in this field. We are using heat sensing technology to capture heat biosignatures in the space and translate that into user activities and vitals, with an aim to alert and inform care professionals of incidents like falls and also fall risk behaviors. Using our insights, care professionals do not just know the when, but also understand the how and the why of incidents, which are keys to preventive and personalized care. In addition to the previous mention we made on behavior monitoring, there is a new field on behavior modification. So what I'm referring to is another emerging application of machine learning where individuals are given recommendations around suitable changes in their behavior that usually affect negatively their health. We can now do that. We are getting more and more high resolution data, and we can analyze the behavior of individuals, recommend those changes, but it will require vast amounts of data from different sources. And that's where integration starts becoming a bit more important, and I'm going to touch this in a moment. At TenderTech, for example, we try to integrate as many third-party devices as possible so that we can increase the amount of sources that we draw data from. But unfortunately, that is not always possible as the field is not made up for integration. The aim here is to be able to share with care professionals information in the form of diaries that enable them to build the story that often gets missed outside care visits. And then in turn, they can suggest that behavior modification suggestions. The final part here to mention is that all these applications will support the personalization of health and social care services, which are central to patient-centered care. Patient-centered care has wide benefits. It's aligned with the patient's needs, their expectations, their belief. It's been studied and documented to increase the benefits, improve clinical outcomes, and patient satisfaction in addition to increasing service efficiency. So machine learning algorithms can allow healthcare workers to examine each patient's data and develop a tailored care plan effortlessly. As I said earlier, integration and consolidation of different data sources will be key. And that is why, as part of this presentation, I wanted to touch a little bit on two essential challenges that will define the future development and adoption of machine learning in smart homes and data-driven care. So the first one is, no reason to guess it, is integration. It's a headache at the moment of putting together smart homes, undoubtedly, because we have a range of competing platforms, devices, and standards. And to date, suppliers have focused on lock-in strategies that discourage purchasing devices from different suppliers. And this has inhibited the adoption of smart home technology as consumers end up having to use an array of different apps to set up and control all of the different devices that end up in their homes. The market, though, the good news is that the market is gradually being transformed. It's being transformed because big tech giants are entering the smart home and the digital health markets. They have recently announced, specifically Apple, Google, Amazon, and others, they have announced the development of a shared standard for connecting devices. And that means that increasingly, more and more manufacturers will feel the need to ensure that their products and services will work on these platforms and comply by the standard offered by the tech giants in order to capture the broadest customer base. However, consumers might end up facing the same problems that they are facing now because they might end up being tied to a specific network or platform provider, which can then put limits on the options available if a particular tool or device does not connect to that Apple or Amazon platform of their choice. So tech giants are teaming up to create a set of standards designed to make smart homes simpler, but will they be more secure? And that is the second challenge we need to address in time. Such a move might make it easier to develop and sell solutions that will work with the many available smart home systems. But what happens to our data? How are they stored? Who has access to them? And what are they used for? What we need to know is that behind the concepts of smart homes and digital health innovation sits a data marketplace projected to surpass over $1 trillion mark in the next 5 years. As part of this marketplace, it is envisaged that the data would be a commodity that us, service users and patients, trade in exchange for health and care outcomes. However, as the market grows, so is the potential for this data to be used in all sorts of unsavory ways, as we have already seen happening in other industries. Smart home devices can already tell if someone is away, for example, from home, and can provide an increasing amount of information regarding one's habits and possibly their health condition. This information is already of interest to an array of stakeholders, and I talk here with experience around the stakeholders that approach us. For example, high-end providers who offer shelter housing to a large population might want to be interested in the data because they want to ensure of the health and safety of their properties. Insurance companies want to know and profile their claimants, and energy companies might want to predict who might default on their bills. So whilst big tech giants are already taking care of the technical infrastructure that will be needed to exist to support this marketplace, it is important that the development of regulatory frameworks governing interoperability, data privacy, data ownership follow the same pace. Otherwise, we risk the tech giants writing the rules of tomorrow. These opportunities and challenges are the focus of the Horizon 2020 Fund Smile project, which I'm part of along with AD. It's a European and Canadian research and innovation collaboration looking into better ways of independent living for seniors as we go forwards. So SMILE aims to lead to better coordination of care and support and establishing a market pool of technological solutions. And as part of this project, we will also be looking at the policies needed to support such smart environments. I'm going to end the presentation saying that Hippocrates was more interested in understanding the person than the disease, rather than the disease that has the person. So the advancements we are making in the fields of Internet of Things and machine learning have the potential of enabling health and social care providers individual care plans to meet the evolving needs of patients, regardless of care and housing setting, and hopefully regardless of budget as well. Today, we are already witnessing the first application of these advancements, and without a doubt, the influx of data coming from smart devices have the potential to help us unlock better, more efficient, and more personalized health and social care system. But it is more important than ever for providers, patients, and vendors to work together at this stage to guarantee a smooth and secure flow of information across the care chain so that all stakeholders can reap the benefits from the emerging data-driven care models. So thank you very much, and I look forward to receiving your questions today.
Thank you very much, Afroditi, for this very, very clear presentation. It's very nice to see that our participants are already very eager to start a discussion all together. So that's very positive. So then I will quickly give the floor to Tijmen Schep to present his view on this topic.
Yes. Can you hear me? And you should probably see a black screen right about now, but by now you should see a logo. Is that correct? Great.
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Tijmen Schep. I'm an artist and a designer and a technology critic. And I'm going to talk to you about Candle, which is one of the projects that I've been working on for the past year, which is a privacy-friendly smart home prototype. Today, I will be talking about the latest research that we're doing, and I'm also going to give you a bit of a sneak preview into what we're up to. So you're going to be the first to see some things, which might be fun. I thought it would also be relevant to mention that I'm a consortium partner in Sherpa, which is a Horizon 2020 project by the European Commission that looks at issues around artificial intelligence that we will run into as a society by 2025. So I'm first going to start with a very short video that explains what Candle is in the basics so that I don't have to do that, and it's probably faster. So here we go.
If you have a smart home, or if you want one, you may be worried about privacy. That's why we're introducing Candle. Candle is a privacy-friendly smart home. Careful design, you've been able to create a system that keeps all your data inside your own home. It doesn't require an internet connection, yet is still able to offer features like voice control. Candle offers a range of devices, which include an electricity use sensor, a smart lock, a carbon dioxide sensor, a thermostat, a fine dust sensor, and the anemone. This is a new type of device that can disconnect your entire home from the internet, for example, when you're sleeping or when you're away from home. Our main goal is to inspire the producers of smart home devices to implement more privacy-enhancing features.
All right, so our research is really about this question of whether or not you can have both privacy and convenience at the same time. Because I think that a lot of people right now believe they have to choose between privacy and convenience. And we wanted to find out, is that really true? So our research showed that it really wasn't true. If you design it well, you can have both privacy and convenience. And I guess Ad mentioned, I also wrote a little book about the subject of privacy and design for a lot of my students years ago. Anyway, so what Candle does is, first of all, it tries to avoid using the cloud. You can connect to the internet if you want, but it doesn't do this by default. So it's what you call edge first design. But this was only the first step and the most obvious step in creating Candle. Candle is also kind of unique in that it tries to actively address a second issue with smart homes that I hardly ever hear any debate about. And it starts basically with this issue, which is that smart homes can be abused and can create a surveillance culture. So here we see this example of how in the United States, as of January 2019, the domestic violence charity Refuge had documented more than 2,500 people seeking their help because they had experienced issues with technology-facilitated abuse. So basically, for example, women who are being abused by their husbands kick the husband out, but the husband would still be using the smart home which he installed to keep track on the family. And for example, in some cases, he would then find out there was maybe a new lover in the house or something else, and he would come over and he would, be aggressive and all these issues. And this is the tip of the iceberg, this issue. There's a lot of issues around smart homes where we can basically say that we sometimes know too much, where there is too much insight into what's going on. So an example that you might even personally recognize, and that a lot of people secretly do, is that they keep track of how long their cleaning person is actually cleaning the house. So this is a vastly used use case of smart homes, which is to find out, did my cleaner clean for the full 2 hours? We also find that children are being tracked to a large degree to find out their behavior and to make sure they behave in a certain way.
Recording stopped.
The recording has stopped. Okay. We also find that partners are tracking each other. So we find these news messages about relationships. Recording
in progress.
So basically what you could say that these systems can have an unhealthy influence in our notion of trust. And some quick examples is that with a smart lock can also register what time someone got home, and that can be sensitive. A CO2 sensor can register how many people are in a room, and that can be sensitive when you want to not let your parents know that you're having someone over, for example. An energy use sensor can, of course, say a lot about behavior inside the home, sometimes revealing more than you would like. A humidity sensor can, for example, reveal when someone's having sex. Smart lights can reveal what time someone went to bed and all these things. So all these systems have this built-in surveillance capability. And oftentimes these systems are, of course, bought by parents, by the father who's taking this classic 1950s gender role of being the father, and by implementing this technology and through that controlling the home, as it were, having power. But it doesn't always have to be abuse. It can also just be that in your home, you might just want to be able to give a surprise party without your spouse already finding out through the smart home's data that there is something going on. So for us, Candle is not just about limiting control by keeping data inside the home and not letting it go to the cloud, but it's also about looking at what we call covalence, which is how smart homes can influence social relations and dynamics inside the home and can damage those relationships in an unwanted way. So I think the first issue is very much on the radar right now. You know, Apple and IKEA and all these organizations are very aware of keeping data locally in their own home. But the second issue is, I think, not on the radar at all, and is, I think, an issue we'll see more in the coming years. So that was the problem that I tried to describe. So Candle is about these two types of surveillance and trying to have fun, like saying it fights both types. And I want to kind of show you examples of how we're trying to deal with this issue, which is, you know, all very experimental and experimenting with how that could even be done, but it's interesting, I think. And we try to refer to these things as making the smart home polite, because I heard from the op that the word empathic is already used for even more surveillance. So that's how we try to use it. And you've already seen these products, for example. So these are some examples of sensors. For example, you see a CO2 sensor on the top left. And what you find here is that we worked together with a jewelry designer, and she gave all these devices skirts. And then the idea is that you can hide the display of these devices when you have, for example, family coming over or friends coming over, so they can't see your data as easily. For example, if you have a very dusty home, you might want to hide that from your friends that way. You also see that these devices here in top right, for example, have big switches, and those are motorized, and they indicate whether or not a device is sending and transmitting data or not. So you can only transmit it when you turn it on, but when you turn it off, it doesn't do that. You can also do that with your voice control, for example. You can say, stop data transmission of the carbon sensor, and it will turn itself off. Another example on the bottom right is that, for example, a smart home controller has a voice control with a microphone, but the microphone is a normal USB microphone that you can always disconnect, so you can be fully sure that you're not being listened to. So what we were trying to do now with Candle 2.0, you could say, is explore this idea of having one privacy setting for the home. You could easily change the whole setting from recording everything to only seeing live data but not logging things to full privacy and not showing and recording anything. For example, when you have friends over or when you want to be polite towards guests. We also thought it would be nice to have this button that you could press to completely delete the last 30 minutes of data, or to delete the next 30 minutes of data, and to have some kind of control when data is recorded in a very simple way. So we started out with basically looking at scenarios and trying to find out if it was even possible to make things this simple. But of course, it turned out to not be the case. So for example, here you see us comparing what happens, how you would like your house to be set up when you have a cleaning person coming over versus when you have a babysitter coming over. And you quickly see that these things diverge. You want certain devices to record things, other devices to not record things, to be polite. And here you see also some interesting things. So what we call, for example, smoothing data. So smoothing data is when you try to, well, I'll show you a bit later as well, but you also see blurring, smoothing, and thresholding. So I'll get to those a little bit more in detail later, actually. But we found all these new words and ways of describing things that we would like to happen. But in short, what we try to build now is this ability to have privacy scenarios, where depending on the scenario, like if you have friends over for dinner, or if your friends are in your home for a weekend while you are not, you can create these scenarios where all your devices respond and collect data in a different level or a different modality, a different precision. So I'll give you an example. This is how currently our presence sensing software, so we can detect which devices are on the Wi-Fi, and if they are on the Wi-Fi, then you know that person X is home or not. But as you can see, this now has a button called Data Mute, and when you press it, it will. I don't know if you can see the video. No, I don't know if you can see the video, but when you press it, it will add an hour to it not recording anything. So whenever you press it, whenever someone presses it, you don't know who did it. Whenever it's pressed, for the next coming hour, this device will not record whether or not someone is present or not. It will not be tracked. So this is a way to have plausible deniability. So anybody in the home can disable the tracking of this specific device, and anybody can lengthen that period, but without knowing exactly who it was. So that's a way of trying to navigate the social complexities here. and what I think we see in all these things is that we're really trying to question these assumptions that data has to be collected perfectly and that data has to be collected precisely. So not all the time and not at the same precision level. For example, there you see this idea of this data blurring or data smoothing, where we want to have this option where you can say, well, sometimes I want to have precise data about, for example, my energy use or something else, a sensor like a humidity sensor. And sometimes I want to set it to a mode where it only records the average of every hour and only that gets logged. So then you still have the average data, you still have insight, but you don't have the precision that might lead to social unwanted situations. So that's one of these things that we're trying to build in. And that's really quite difficult because most of these systems that, for example, we work with or build on aren't really set up for this at all. Most smart home systems are really assuming that we want to have perfect data recorded all the time. Here's another example. This is the privacy manager tool that we built. This is still early development, but the idea here is that you can completely remove data. You can easily do it precisely. You can remove everything before a date or after a date, but you can also manipulate data points. So for example, to change what time you got home. And you can even create totally new data points. So to pretend that you were home when you were not. So the idea is that here your smart home will allow you to lie. And we find that lying is really vital for human relationships. To have the ability to do this is vital to humans, to be able to lie to each other and say, yeah, I got home on time, or yeah, no, we didn't. We weren't planning a secret party for you. No, nothing happened. These things are vital in homes, and currently smart home systems do not address this complexity. So these are experiments for us to work on that. Another maybe a fun example that I can practically show you is this is our a smart doorbell prototype. I've taken off the cover, but what you can see here is that if I press the button, only then does the slider move away above the camera. So the camera is usually not recording, and not only that, it's actively communicating to the person outside the door that it's not communicating. It's not a matter of trust. No, you can see that there is really a slider in front of it, so you can be very sure about that. So that's how we are trying to explore these issues, try to be polite, have homes that are polite towards others that visits, and not harm these social relationships unnecessarily. And we think that's a big issue for the coming decades that is not really being addressed. So for us, this is about trust. We want to create new affordances that recognize these social complexities and the sensitivities of human relationships. And we want to challenge the assumption that data collection has to be perfect and precise all the time, which I think most of the industry still believes. As I said, like, humans need to be able to lie. That's like a social lubricant. And I think a general issue you could also say that this is about trust in the sense that if you only trust your children because you have data about their behavior, then that's a different type of trust than when you trust your children because you have an agreement with them. Right? So we want to avoid that we replace real human trust with mediated trust, as we see a lot with other systems right now. Like with Airbnb, where you don't really trust the people who enter your home. You trust that Airbnb has created a rating system that manages that. So you outsource trust to some other party. And we don't think that's real human trust. And we want to create a home that still helps children develop real trust and real relationships with real autonomy. We have to be really sensitive to how technology can damage that. In a way, you could say that real trust always requires a leap of faith, like giving a bit of control away. So on the topic of control, it is sometimes good to give it away and in return get some real trust with people. That's my talk about Candle. I'm open to any questions, and I'm looking forward to a lively debate on these topics. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Tijmen. I think it was a very, very enlightening presentation, especially about the social aspect. I also didn't know that personally, so thanks for sharing that. So then we can finally start the discussion, because I think people are very eager to start this. So I will also share my screen now again. So here we see our keynote speakers again, and I will quickly go to the first question that was addressed today, because there are already quite some in the chat, which is very good. So the first comment was hues can also be dimming. That's true. And then Carlos Cesar asked during Ad's presentation, but also the other keynote speakers are very welcome to answer these questions. How can we be sure that all the data about our presence and use of the smart home are not used for other purposes that we don't know? Is the current EU data privacy regulation, so the GDPR, enough in this respect? What would you think?
Sorry, the question was addressed to me, right?
Yes, it was firstly
yeah.
addressed to you, Ad.
But wait a second, the host asked to start your video. What does that mean? That's a pop-up in my screen. I don't know what it means.
I can see you, Ad, so it's good.
It's
okay.
fine right now, we can see you.
All right. Okay. Now I see. Sorry. Now I have to go back to the question. Let me see. What was the question?
So, how can we be sure that all the data about presence? Yes, there it is.
And users are not used for other. Yeah. We have heard now Tijmen and also Aphrodite, and they. I think we cannot be sure unless we use the new device of Tijmen. I would say.
It's
the current
one.
and the current EU data privacy regulation is probably not enough. But Tijmen, you are in the New Horizon project that is dealing with that regulation.
Yep. I mean, I think what I found and already mentioned a little bit is that there is a lot of interest right now in this idea of data ownership as a way of solving these issues. And I find that in most cases, these initiatives don't really acknowledge the complexity of what data is, and thus are really not a good solution. So you have to understand that there is data, that 4 types of data, essentially. Data you provide willingly. There's data that is observed about you, for example, with cookies or with the camera. And then, of those 2 types of data, people are usually aware that is going on. But you also have derived and inferred data.
Yep.
And derived data, both of them are basically about taking one set of data and then creating a new type of prediction about you. So if I have, for example, your Fitbit data, I can create a score that says how healthy you are. And what is going on is that in the United States, companies will say that this score they create about your health is not your data. It is their opinion about you and is protected under free speech. So I think that's different from Europe, where in Europe, for example, if I create a health score about you based on your Fitbit data, then that is still your data, and I'm not allowed to process it that easily. So Europe has better protections. But I think the problem is that most people, when they say, I want to have control over my data, they only think about the raw data. They don't understand that as soon as another organization has access to your data for only a second, they will be able to create all these derived forms of data from it, these scores. And then those can go to other companies. For example, we know that with the Google Nest devices, as soon as you buy one, your data will end up with 1,000 companies. And people don't realize that. So I think that's a big issue. We can't have a public debate unless people understand the complexity, and they don't yet. So we have very simplistic solutions at the moment.
Well, the reality also is that a lot of the infrastructure that exists around collecting data and analyzing data and storing data is from companies based in the US. This is a complication that we faced also in the SMILE project because we had to make, for example, a selection on the cloud data service provider we're going to go with. Since we are producing machine learning algorithms based on data that are collected, we need what we call a cloud server to keep doing those calculations of the background in order to produce alerts or insights. And it was recently brought to our attention that obviously in the US there are different laws, and especially there are security laws that force any US company to hand in information on data they collected even in the European soil if there is a legitimate security reason. The good news around this is that there's been a judgment from the Court of Justice, the European Court of Justice is now called Schrems 2, where it actually instructs the creation of what we call an EU data boundary by which all companies have to comply. So Microsoft has already started making changes. Any data that is collected in Europe has to stay in Europe and cannot leave this territory. And hopefully also other providers like Amazon AWS will follow suit. But as is mentioned before, how data is collected and also under which purpose it is used for research and development, that's a very complex discussion. Because there are products being made and it's very difficult at times to distinguish between how your data is stored and then used to create a different product that is meant for a different user. As I presented earlier, what machine applications do is they try to predict outcome based on the experiences that they have already learned. And those experiences are data, to put it simply. So there's a very fine line where our data becomes a general knowledge for a system that predicts outcome for someone else. And that is why I fully agree with all the panel that we have good laws in Europe, but maybe they don't address the full complexity of the research and development being done in this field at this stage.
I agree.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for your comments on that comment. I think it was quite clear. And I also see when looking at the second comment, we should request local cloud IoT app service so we are not dependent on internet public cloud service to control our home. Well, Time, I think you're very happy to see that comment.
No, I mean, I'm not the only one. Like Apple has recently announced that their voice control will be fully local as well, for example. So, and IKEA has for a long time created fully local systems.
Yep.
There are companies, big companies, who understand the value of privacy, and for their brand, basically. I think IKEA does it very much because they don't want to harm their brands with any data leaks and things like that. But the end result is the same. It's that it's a good system which, still offers a lot of convenience and at the same time protects the users. So it can be done. I think that's the point of my project is you can do this well. I think this is where there's big opportunity for European companies to say, well, we're going to create a more ethical type of technology. And I often compare it to, for example, ecological food and McDonald's. Like Silicon Valley offers McDonald's, and Europe should offer biological, ecological food. And I think that's what the GDPR, the price regulation, is really about. It's not just about protecting consumers, it's also about creating this market for more ethical products. And I think that's a really smart move, and I'm very on board with that.
May I just say, though, there's a few challenges technically to do this. If you're just talking about smart devices that are operating based on specific schedules or alerts or thresholds, that might be a more straightforward application, because you can upload really on the edge, on the device, those schedules or alerts or thresholds. But when it comes to using machine learning for more complex behavior modeling, in order for the house to become more predictive and more preventative in the future, then there is this, by nature, there is this inherent exchange of information with a server somewhere, a server that holds a lot more than just your data and can produce a lot of algorithms that are helping supporting this preventative, empathetic home. And that's where things get complicated, because at the moment, the technology we have available, it would be really quite expensive to set up a server inside your home that is constantly running at the background to create bespoke algorithms just for you. Although companies at the moment, when it comes to machine learning and behavior modeling and heavy data like vision-based systems, for example, that go beyond just text-based information coming from sensors. I see that in the past few months, they've been trying to offer servers in your vicinity as an alternative to having a server in a different territory within Europe. Again, those are marketed in a much more higher range and expensive kind of price point. But it seems that privacy, as Timon said earlier, is becoming the brand of certain companies. They recognize this, and moves are being made towards that direction, which is positive for consumers.
I don't fully agree. I think it is already very possible to do these things on the edge. We have federated systems, for example, to create machine learning algorithms in a distributed manner. I think also there's this, what not a lot of companies like to talk about is that for example, with the voice control systems, when we had this debate around Apple and Amazon, etc., recording all these voice messages, and then we found out that all these companies that work for them were listening to these messages in order to train the system, and people were upset. And I think what these companies then said was, well, we need to have all this data in order to train the algorithm, so that's just how it is. Except Apple, who then said we're going to make it opt-in, which I think is the right thing to do. The point is, though, that what we don't discuss is that algorithms can graduate. At a certain time, they've learned enough. For example, if you record 10,000 copies of Dutch people saying, please turn on the lights, then you have enough. You don't need 11,000. It won't add anything to the quality of the model anymore. So they can graduate. So after, for example, the smart home, the voice control that we use with Candle, so I can say, hey, Candle, turn on the living room light. This is completely local. And it has just been made with a model that is ready and complete and done. It doesn't need any new data to work. So I think that's a discussion we should also be having, is when are these things done? And do we have to continuously send all this data to a cloud? So I think there's a lot of things like this where we can tone it down and not go along with the narrative of data needing to be collected all the time and in high detail and all this. I think there is a lot of things that we can question and improve.
I completely agree with your point. What I'm referring to is to more heavyweight contextual basis systems, where you have data sources among the house. It's not just one or two sensors, and you're trying to model much more than just turning on and turning off the lights. When you're trying to actually monitor behavior to pick up early onset of disease, for example. In these cases, you could train a model with some initial data set, but if you want this model to be up to date with how the behavior of a person that can have changes from month to month and from week to week, if you want this model to be able to be successful, unfortunately, you will require, if not continuous monitoring, but periodic upload of data to update the model you have created for that specific user. And this is where technically it's becoming challenging. So for example, we have, as I said, hit signatures that we translate to certain activities. And we work in an array of settings from private homes to care homes. And what we see is that originally we were doing everything on the edge. So we had equipped houses with a large, what you would call usually a PC desktop, which would do all the calculations. But the reality was that our models were reaching a point where, because they had been trained with the first month of data, they would have created a profile, which then would not be great at being preventive and predictive every time there was a deviation. Let's not forget that humans do not remain the same at all times, especially aging populations. They go through certain stages of aging, and any system you create, especially that has to do with safety, security, and aging, it has to be flexible enough to follow the user along their aging journey. That's a technical challenge with then using a fully edge system or a mixed system with cloud and edge or only cloud. I'm not a fan of only cloud. I think it's unnecessary. I think the best combination would be the combination of both worlds. And in the end, also, there's another issue that I'm not sure it will be interesting to your audience, but from a commercial point of view, as a company that has received investment from investors who are active in the age tech sector, a common question is, where are your algorithms sitting? The problem being that if an algorithm is sitting on a device, is considered to be more accessible or hackable and less commercially viable for a company that is looking to scale. So it's considered a liability a lot of the times, where if you mention that your algorithms are sitting somewhere between the edge and the cloud, that means you don't have a one-point failure where someone can take your model, copy it, and then create their own device, because your model is always evolving partly in the cloud. We specifically at TenderTech, what we do is we have uploaded most of our algorithms on the device, but periodically we send data to update those models and then send it back through over-the-air updates to your device in order to be able to keep predictions quite accurate about your behavior. I hope this helps a little bit put a few more aspects that companies are dealing with in the sector.
Well, thanks for these very clear statements. I also see quite some comments in the chat that also are addressing these topics. So, for example, I have to scroll a bit to the top. We see choosing a Pro KNX solution. Then it all runs on the device in the user's home. No data leaves the home, so maybe that's quite comparable to the Candle subject. We also see another question of Carlo asking what is the role perspective of the user while designing smart home applications that do recognize behavioral patterns. So, for example, I would not like automatic switch on of light when I wake up in the middle of the night. So about behavior, I think we already quite discussed this maybe a bit, that this can be personalized, but what would be your opinion?
I've already spoken a lot, so I thought I'd give someone else.
Same applies to me. Ad, would you like to?
Yeah, well,
this was for you, man.
It has been discussed, I think. It's possible, yes. Yeah, let's go on to the next question. Yeah.
Yeah, there are many interesting questions. So we also see here one. Are there any emerging smart machine-based applications, and this was asked during your presentation, Aphrodite, developed to monitor the fire safety of elderly persons who are the most at risk from fire? And they say that almost 5,000 persons die from fire across Europe each year. Do you know such applications?
You are in luck because we're developing one such application based on heat sensing technology. But at the moment, I think in the European market, there's not a specific, apart from the normal fire alarms that pick up monoxide and the CO2 concentrations, there's nothing different to that kind of technology, but it is a big problem. I guess also it depends because in Europe, there are different standards for fire safety. So north of Europe, central and south of Europe have varying risks, fire risks. Where we are in Greece in the south, because of the different type of construction being used and different domestic appliances being used, usually a fire alarm is not a standard fitting into a home. But where we're active, for example, in the UK as well, there is a pretty standardized fitting to put whether you're elderly or not. And that at the moment seems to be adequate even for elderly people.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very optimistic, Aphrodite. That's nice to hear. And we also see in the chat one comment about a very interesting report about home monitoring technology is moving beyond and extending telemedical applications, which is true. We need to establish practical methods to balance privacy and the needs for care. So you can also see this report in the chat if you want to see it. And we see another question. Is it possible to move further on from data privacy towards new data sharing or data altruism business models where networks of users decide to share and use their smart home data to deliver benefits to them all together? So, for example, peer-to-peer exchange of energy, storage capacity, and can we monetize or even incentivize this? Do you understand this question? Because it was quite lengthy.
I can answer. I'll try. Yes, of course, it's possible. I think this relates to the ownership of data discussion that we had earlier. Where there's a lot of initiatives to say, well, you put your data in some kind of vault, and you'll be able to decide when you share it with whom. And as I said earlier, those can be useful initiatives, but they often take the risk of seeing data only as a commodity, and data can be priceless when it comes to sensitive data. So I don't see this direction of saying, well, we're all going to put our data in this vault and then we can decide how we monetize it. That is not a healthy direction for society to move in. It's a direction that Silicon Valley would like us to move in, but it's not a healthy direction. And it's not the solution to the privacy issue either. That being said, if people opt in for it and if they would like to do it, then sure, if you would like to help develop these type of algorithms in the cloud, etc., be my guest. And there I mostly have the issue that people, as I said earlier, it's difficult to ask people for consent because most people don't really understand how derived and inferred data work. So they don't really fully understand if they give their data away, how that will then go everywhere, or can go and end up in a lot of places that they might not oversee. Often, if you click on the I agree button, you will agree to a lot of things, and where the data is stored is not the only important thing. There is also how it will be used and who it will be shared with, and if it will be derived, and if they are responsible for how third parties use the data. There are all these little hidden things often in these privacy policies. I think so far there has been a lot of abuse of this. Because we have this complex situation where consent is really just not really working, but it's the only thing that's often used. It's a complex situation. I think it will get better with time. When there will be more scandals, people will start to learn this. It took a long time for us to realize the problem with oil. Right now with data, we're still in the phase like with oil in the 50s, where everybody's still like, yeah, I want to have more data. Great. I think it will take a case for society to truly realize the issue with data and to have a really fundamentally different perspective on data. So the products that I make are not for the mainstream yet. They're very much for, the people who already understand the issues. And, 20 years ago, my father used to go to a specialized supermarkets to get ecological food. And now I can buy it in every supermarket. So the same thing will happen with my products or these type of products, where right now I'm relatively rare what I do, but I'm sure that in 20 years, the work that I do will be very normal. And it'll just take a lot of awareness. And the best way to grow it is a lot of scandals.
That's clear, Simon. That's clear. And I also see a question from Paul Doyle. He usually talks about healthcare, which I also find a very interesting subject related to these things. And for example, could we use the data switch for dementia? If you want, Paul, you can also ask the question directly to the people themselves, which you find most interesting, especially about quality of life, healthcare. How do we want to do this? So if you want, you can unmute yourself and ask the question to our keynote speakers.
Oh, hello. Hi there. Yeah, I was thinking about it's for Timon. People are switching data on and off, and it's a fantastic idea. It's a really good concept. But if you're working on behalf of an individual who possibly, oops, bear with me for a second. Is that any better? Can you see me?
Yeah.
My head. Okay, yeah. So I was just thinking, it offers some issues in relation to ethics, because if you're turning on and off their data stream for them, how do you ensure that you've got their permission to do so?
Is that addressed for me? Or?
Yeah. I mean, so you were saying, I mean, it's a fascinating sort of concept, this idea that you can get the building to lie, and I really, really like that. But I think, if I work with individuals with impaired cognition, so somebody could be working on their behalf, and they've got to translate their behaviours into perhaps an indication that they would like that data to be switched off. But it's down to the individual's interpretation of the client or the person with dementia's issues. So there's an element of there's a potential element of a conflict of interest there. So if that exists, how would you overcome that?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. The question, of course, if anybody can press the button to delete the last 30 minutes of data, how will that not be abused? And of course, it can be abused. So you basically give everybody in a home a dead man switch, and you don't know who pressed it. But the situation for us is preferable to the current situation, which is much easier to abuse because all the data is there. So it's not a perfect solution, but like we are an experimental research project.
Yeah.
So we are allowed to do these crazy things to find out if this is a useful solution. But of course, there might be downsides to this. Absolutely. Of course, the biggest way to solve privacy issues in a smart home is not in the end through technology. It is through having a good discussion around the kitchen table about what you find normal and how you want the things to do. Like the question of whether or not there should be a humidity sensor in your children's bedroom, that should not be fixed with a technological switch. It should be a question of why do we understand the risks, what this means? Does the children have any say in this? So there's more systems that we have thought up. For example, we also wanted to have this ability to share control. For example, when a child would become 13, ownership of a device could be transferred to that child. And then the child would have veto rights over the device. So instead of everybody being able to press the button, it would only be the owner, the child in this case, of the button. So there are all these kinds of possibilities, all kinds of models on how to better manage these interpersonal relationships and how these data flows within the family. And I've only described, in a short amount of time, only one or two of these experiments, but there are a lot of thoughts that we have on this. And you can do this in a lot of ways.
Excellent. And I think, and just whilst I've got my camera on, we're dabbling in the United Kingdom again with assisted living. And I think I've been working with assistive technology for more years than I care to remember. But one of the challenges we find is measuring the impact. So if we're looking at, say, a social care setting where people are looking at installing technologies that will, to some degree, make people's lives better, one of the challenges we find is actually putting actually finding a metric by which saying measuring the journey that the client themselves has made in terms of their independent living, their health, their well-being. I may have completely missed it, but I'm struggling to find quick and simple and easy metrics by which you can say their life was like this before the implementation. Now look, they are more independent, they're more healthy, their psychosocial well-being has improved. What tools do the panel use?
Paul, you touched on a very important issue, and the quick answer is there are no standard tools. So our pilot sites are mostly in England as well, and also in Europe. But the thing is, you're dealing with humans. So the outcomes for each person are quite bespoke. Also, what they will define themselves as improvement will be very, very different. I will give you an example. We put our system on a gentleman's setting. He was living in shelter housing. He had some mobility issues. And we were able to produce information around the schedules that he was receiving visitations from the staff to help him with his daily living activities. We presented this data to him, and we wonder whether there was evidence of loneliness, as there were kind of long stretches of time that he was spending alone, especially during the afternoons. And surprisingly, although someone could have seen that and go, oh, we have to increase our visitations during this period of the day, when we showed this data to the gentleman, he said, I enjoy my time alone. Do not confuse loneliness with time spent alone, because I feel independent. I actually feel that I get too many visits in the day. And that reminds me of my incapacity to do certain activities for myself. So when you involve the human element, it's very difficult for you to have a standard table and say, well, if this happens, then that means I have an improved quality of life. The best best approach we found is to do user-centered design. So you have to involve the user in the stage from every stage, from setting up devices down to sharing data, and then discovering what that means for them, what are their experiences, and what is important for them. And then you can also have more informed discussion about privacy settings, switching off, going on a flight mode, and doing that in a way that also doesn't endanger the outcomes. Because if you're just using lifestyle sensors, that's one thing. If you have people with dementia and those systems are integral to a security and safety plan, and you might risk missing some information that will be critical to their health, that again is a very different discussion. So in general, social care and healthcare is all bespoke and tailored because every person is different, I guess. That's our view on it.
I fully agree with Aphrodite here. I think the question could be, why do you want to have quantitative data? Why don't you go for qualitative data? Just ask people if they think it's better. That'll be good data.
I think one of the reasons why I would ask that is that having come from the NHS, I think people like they like
graphs and data sets and
I mean, I think the catchphrase is evidence-based practice. So if they're going to sign off on a project, they're going to say, where's the value in this? And emotional and social well-being is very hard to define with a ruler or or a calculator. So we know. I mean, I've been involved in the programs long enough to know that they may have a meaningful impact on people's lives. But the difficulty is then when you're explaining that to an accountant, we need to be able to have a quick and easy sort of metric by which we can say, look, let's get past the let's get past, does it work? We know it works. Let's see how we move on to the next phase.
So that's the whole point, though, with using all these technologies. So we can shift from one size fits all to this is for you, this is bespoke, and this is for you. I understand your pain. I have gone through it through many commissioning panels. It's difficult because there is a need to scale things up and deploy them on a massive scale. But a lot of the times, I think the individual part and the individual approach is being missed when we try to use one single indicator for people who have the same disease. I don't think that actually improves outcomes. Quite to the contrary, it disregards a lot of the wishes people have around their treatment or their care plan.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for commenting on that. And Afroditi and Ad, you told us you both work in the SMILE project, which is working with people with dementia and also with the technology. So could you maybe give us a very practical example? How do you handle data privacy from people who are demented? We can't really commit to reading things anymore. How do you handle these things in a practical way?
Well, Aphrodite, you want to answer again? You are more close to that. But of course, we have the
what I will
proxy
say
at the year forward.
Yes, what I will say is we're early in the project. We have identified a number of challenges because it really changes. The approach will change on the stage you are with your disease, obviously. And our goal is clearly in the project, when it comes to dementia patients, to be able to move people who are at the early onsets back home and keep them there as long as possible before they have to be moved to a different setting. But it's quite challenging also with respect to what we talked about earlier. We have questions around who is going to use this data. Is it going to be the family? Is it going to be the carers in the care setting? Is a dementia patient going to have access to them and what they can understand from it? I would say all these conversations, they sound like they should have ready answers, but they still remain quite niche and quite ever developing. So hopefully we will be able to share more insights on this front next year. We started this year 6 months ago, so we're still in the process of deploying a lot of technologies. Hopefully we're going to have a few case studies coming up in 2022. I don't know if Ad wants to add anything on this
I assume it was clear also for you, Ad. And okay, I see.
May I tell something? Carlos speaking.
Sure, Carlo.
Yes. No, I would like just to mention two things of the interesting debate. The question from Paul on the quality of life, and the answer very, very, very interesting. We will have to develop, I think, that further. But in the question from Paul, there was also the mentioning how the community, which tools the community could use to measure the quality of life of an occupant. And the answer, we are more in the direction of considering how difficult it is to really measure the individual well-being of the people based on their behavior, and the importance also of qualitative understanding of their needs. But there is also the community dimension. I think that there are some indicators, especially connected to public health issues. You consider all the consequences of the COVID pandemic and how to handle that, and the life at home of people that has this kind of disease. And also issues concerning the quality of the space in the home to be prevented by being infected, for example. All these kind of things, I think, can be considered as area where community quality of life indicators are needed from the point of view of the quality of life in a place where the homes are one of the bases where you have to measure the quality of life of people. So I think that really this question has been raised and is answered also very interesting, I think. But maybe we should also to consider this as something that can develop further. And this is a comment on the debate. And I would like just to have another one that was very interesting about the attitude on data privacy, when Tillman said that what in Europe is considered something that we own, data about our behavior, in the US, for example, is considered data about an opinion, in the sense that you manifest a behavior, but it's a matter of free speech to let people know that based on that behavior you are a certain kind of person. I think this is a very, very important for the connection here with the fundamental cultural differences between Europe and the US. Don't say in China, where there is the social credit system that is rooted in the Chinese culture of being controlled as a good thing. So just to say that there is this other cultural, very from more humanistic point of view, implication of this discussion. In practical terms, I think to consider the quality of life at home as something that should be measurable, but for some purposes, from the community point of view, I think is very, very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, and also today I think it was today or yesterday that we heard that the European Commission is also trying to forbid further experiments with face recognition and emotion recognition, right? So another cultural difference, although I believe also is it in California that it's forbidden? In the US and the rest of the country, we can still work on face recognition, emotion recognition, things like that. Yeah.
This discussion about the cultural implication is relevant when you want to give Europe a kind of role of guiding at the global level ethical values. So I think really is important, this aspect.
Yeah.
Indeed, Carlo. And that's a sad thing. I think we're almost short on time already. And I think talking about face recognition and also seeing the cultural differences, especially between our continents, is a really interesting subject. So hopefully we can all discuss this together in another day. So please also connect with each other through the Living platform, exchange knowledge, exchange experiences, because I think we got a really well session and a really good discussion out of this. So Svetlana, would you want to tell us a bit more about this slide to close our session of today?
Yes, thank you very much, everyone, for active participation and for very interesting presentations to the speakers. And we would like to announce that this October, we will have, sorry, I had my video switch on. Okay, here I am. We have on 19th, 22nd of October, as Living Project participating in Responsible Innovation Summit. And we will lead 4 afternoon sessions on this summit for top managers' perspective on responsible innovation, designing the process of responsible innovation, inclusive innovation, and arrive for smart future living. So you're all very welcome to register and join the event. You'll find the announcement on the Living platform and on the site of Responsible Innovation Summit. The next slide, please. And this summer, we will be working on the showcase videos, which will be also published in autumn. And these showcase videos will cover very different topics around responsible innovation, such as design thinking, responsible design thinking, innovating with blind and visually impaired people, smart mobility, new narrative for responsible innovation, extended reality in teaching and coaching, co-creation toolkits, holographic telepresence, indoor farming and breeding, data privacy in smart homes. So we hopefully during summer will manage to prepare all of this, and please sign up for the notification newsletter of Living, and you will have notice on this on your email. Thank you. This is our platform name, livinginnovation.net, and I thank everyone. Marilyn, I'm not sure if you want to say a couple of words before we finish.
Yeah, sure. So again, this is the Living platform where you can register for those who don't know it yet. So then to close the session, I really want to thank our keynote speakers because they had so much knowledge on this subject. So you were really amazing. So also thanks for answering all the questions. And also thanks for the audience about raising very important questions and also bringing it up. I think we really had a good discussion here. So thank you all. Again, please exchange emails with each other and see how we can learn from each other, because that's the main reason why we also want to do these dialogues. And again, thank you very much and hope to see you again soon.